When I first came to Japan, I came as a tourist, and as an American, I only had a 3-week tourist visa. And after 3 months, I decided that I wanted to stay in Japan. But in order to stay in Japan, I needed to get a visa. So the easiest kind of visa I could get at that time was a work visa. And I started looking for a job. So I found this ad in the paper for a job, and it stated that the job was out in a rural area out in the countryside. And I went to the interview, and they really liked me, and we hit it off well. I think in retrospect they couldn't really find any candidates to go work out in this area. But at that time I was young and I was open to anything. I was adventurous. I was ready for new experiences. And I also only had about a 2-week window where either I could get this work visa or I would have to go back to the United States. So at the interview they described the job to me, and they really emphasized that it was in a very isolated place. It was nothing like Osaka, which is where I lived at the time. Osaka is a huge metropolis with tons of nightlife and people and action and excitement. So they really wanted to emphasize to me that it was going to be the opposite of that. But I decided to take the job. You know, it was only a 2-hour train ride from Osaka. So I thought, you know, it's not too bad. If I feel lonely or whatever, I can come back to Osaka on the weekends or whatever. And without really knowing the conditions I would be living in, I accepted the job. So about 2 or 3 days before my job started, I moved into the house that they accommodated me with. And it was an old Japanese house. It had just one layer of walling, which was just like pretty much just looked like a shack. I mean, the walls looked like a shack. It was just one layer of boards. And then the house was 2 stories. But I actually thought it was cool that I would get to live in a house. Because up until that point, I had been living in a really small apartment. And this house had 2 stories. And then downstairs there were 4 rooms. There was a kitchen, there was a classroom, which is where I would teach, and then there were 2 other rooms. And the rooms had tatami flooring. Tatami is thatched straw. And then dividing the rooms were sliding paper doors, which we call shoji. And then there was an upstairs, and upstairs there were 2 rooms, and I used one of those rooms as my bedroom. And then there was also a rock garden out front, and then in the back of the house on the first floor there was a bathroom. Now this was an old house. It probably built more than 100 years ago. Just a really old Japanese style house. So it was very basic, and the bathroom was also really basic, and it was a really traditional, and when I say traditional I mean old style bathroom. Basically it was a squat toilet, so you just squat down and do your business. And then there was also a urinal. The flooring was tile, and it just this is one thing I really didn't like about the house. I never felt comfortable with a squat toilet, and my image of a urinal is that it's a public place that's dirty. The tile flooring also looked like something from a public bathroom. So I really disliked this bathroom, and I didn't feel comfortable there. I didn't like it at all. So anyways, I started this job and I moved into this house in the dead of winter. It was in the beginning of January, and at night it was really, really cold. I mean, sometimes it would snow at night, and in the morning I'd wake up and there would be 2 or 3 feet of snow on the ground. And since the walls to the house were so thin, I mean, there was no insulation. Basically, it felt like I was outside. You know, I could see my breath. I mean, it was just freezing. And the company provided me with a futon to sleep on. A futon is a Japanese style bedding. It's like a really thick quilt that you lay on the floor, and that's what you sleep on. So I had that, and then I also had something called kake futon, which is it's a thick, heavy quilt that you put over you to keep you warm. And I had to use about 3 of these really heavy quilts just to stay warm at night. They also gave me a kerosene heater, so about every 10 days or so I'd have to go buy kerosene, or a truck actually would come to the neighborhood and fill up a big tank of kerosene, and then I would have to put that in the heater. So I could use that, but I didn't want to keep that on while I was sleeping. So basically I just used these really heavy quilts to stay warm at night, and I mean it was just pretty much the same temperature outside as it was inside. So it was really, really cold at night. And then separating the first story and the second story were some stairs, but these were like not the kind of stairs that you've seen in houses in the West, but these were like stairs that went straight up and down. So you pretty much had to use your hands to climb up the stairs. They were that steep. And sometimes at night I would have to go to the bathroom, so I'd be half asleep, just kind of groggy and spaced out, and I'd have to climb down these really steep stairs. Now I couldn't walk down them forward. I had to walk down them backwards because they were so steep, and I had to be really careful as I climbed down these stairs, because if I fell I'd break a leg or something. So by the time I got to the first floor, by the time I climbed down these stairs, I'd be awake because I'd have to kind of concentrate to get down the stairs safely. And then I'd walk all the way to the back of the house, and I'd walk through the house, and it would just be freezing cold, like just I don't know, it was like camping in Alaska or something. So I'd get to the bathroom, and then I'd use this urinal, and I remember when I was going to the bathroom seeing this waft of steam rise up from my urine. I'm sorry for that image, but that's just that's how cold it was there, and that's like something I always remember. And then so after that I'd climb up these these stairs that were basically like a ladder, and then I'd finally get back to my futon, and by that time I'd be wide awake. So during the daytime I would teach English, but this was in a rural area, so there wasn't a lot of business, and there weren't many students. I'd say during the week I only had about 20 students, so that meant about every day I'd only work 2 or 3 hours. So I had a lot of free time, and I remember that during my free time I was always by myself. At this time I couldn't speak Japanese, and Fukuchiyama, that was the name of the town I lived in. Fukuchiyama was a very, well, the people there were very closed off. They weren't really open to foreigners. They weren't really open to, new people. And I remember the whole time I was there, I only saw one other Western person. So I wasn't really accepted. The neighbors didn't say hi to me or greet me, or nobody was really friendly to me except for my students. So I was pretty isolated, and I was by myself most of the time. So when I didn't have to work, I remember I would ride my bicycle down to the kind of the central area of Fukuchiyama, which was near the only train station in town, and I'd go to a coffee shop and I would study Japanese. I would try to read Japanese, and I would just word by word, well, they use Chinese characters actually, so character by character, I would look these words up in the dictionary and try to remember what the Chinese character looked like. So I would study Japanese, and at night I would write music. I had brought my keyboard with me, so every night I would write music. and I was just by myself all the time. I didn't have any internet, and I did have a TV, but I only got a couple of local Japanese stations, and at that time I didn't understand any Japanese, and so the TV wasn't interesting for me. But I did watch it sometimes just to feel, because even though I didn't understand what they were saying, just having a voice there, I guess made me feel less lonely. So that was my first experience living in an old Japanese house.